Hey everyone, it's Alex the Real Mr. Robinson here, and it's time to talk about the spoiler elements of Godzilla Resurgence, or Shin Godzilla, or Shin Godzilla. So many titles. So many titles. So, if you have yet to see the movie and don't want to be spoiled, then I do have a spoiler-free review on my channel from 2 weeks ago. You can go check that out. And if you have seen the movie or don't care about spoilers at all, then this is the video for you. However, before we get started, there are two things that I want to address. Yesterday morning, on my spoiler-free review for Godzilla Resurgence, I got a comment from Chris Stuckman, the Chris Stuckman, because in my spoiler-free review, I pretty much said that a lot of the major film critics on YouTube have at least one franchise that defines them, and in Chris Stuckman's case, it's Dragon Ball Z. So he saw my review and left a comment saying, quote, "I love you for recognizing my absurd Dragon Ball Z obsession. Great review." Thank you very much, Chris Stuckman. That comment coming from you actually means a lot to me. So I'm glad you enjoyed the review. And if you ever plan on doing a hilariosity review for the 1998 movie, I'm happy to help out if you need the extra help. So once again, thank you, Chris Stuckman, for the comment. Big fan of your work. And the other thing I want to address is that on my spoiler-free review, I got a couple of comments saying that there actually was a suit actor for Godzilla in this movie. And technically, if you want to be technical, there was a motion capture actor providing Godzilla's body movements for this movie. But it's not really the same as a suit actor. When I think of a suit actor, I think of Toho actually building a suit, building miniature sets and having the suit actor destroy those sets in front of the camera. While I'm not going to take away this motion capture actor's job, it's not the same, and in the end, Godzilla is still completely CG from head to toe. There was no actual physical Godzilla suit made for this movie. And I also gotta say, for the motion capture actor who provided Godzilla's movements in this movie, the previous Godzilla actors, Haru Nakajima, Ken Satsuma, and Tsutomu Kitagawa, must be pissed, because this guy has the easiest job playing Godzilla. He just gets to stomp around in a black suit with a plastic Godzilla face, stomping on a bunch of blocks, while Haru Nakajima, when he played Godzilla, suffered burns, electric shocks, nearly suffocated, so he really had to put a lot of effort into filming those movies, especially the original Godzilla, where this guy had the easiest job in the world. But hey, good for him. But now let's talk about the spoilers. There are three elements that I want to talk about in this review. Let's start with the first one, which is the multiple forms of Godzilla. This is something that I didn't expect to happen in the movie. Although, when the film was in production, there were rumors that Godzilla was going to evolve, and I'm not sure where, I think those rumors were dispelled and proven to be untrue. Guess not, because turns out Godzilla, when he first appears in this movie, once he breaches land, there's no easy way to describe it. He looks like this. Yeah, I bet your pants feel loaded right now, because this is one of the elements that really surprised me. And in my spoiler-free review, I mentioned that this is one of the few Godzilla movies to actually surprise me in a long time. There aren't many high-res photos of this form, because Toho did a really good job of trying to hide this thing and keep it out of all the trailers and advertising, so that when you see the movie, you go, "What the shit is that?" But I do have this. So basically, Godzilla's first form is this gray eel-looking thing with legs, no arms. He just has little stubs that are supposed to be arms, gills, fish eyes, and has this really dopey look to him. James Rolfe, in his review on Cinemassacre, compared seeing Godzilla for the first time here to seeing the giant claw. If you don't know what the giant claw is, it's this thing. Yeah, you can't help but laugh at that thing. And he is right. However, I will add to the fact that in the giant claw, when you see the monster, you are laughing at it. You are laughing hysterically. With this, there is that initial shock of, what the hell is that? And you might have to laugh at it. But after a while, this thing goes from laughable to creepy, because it just wobbles around. It has these dead, expressionless eyes, and its gills are spilling blood into the streets. And you're just like, oh god, this thing is actually really unsettling. It's creepy. And there's even one scene that they've never done this in a Godzilla movie, where Godzilla is scaling up a building and his weight collapses the building and it kills a family of 3, a mother, a father, and their, I assume, 8-year-old child. And you see them fall out from the building, and that's just kind of shocking and horrifying that this is the first Godzilla movie to show the death of a kid. So anyway, Godzilla first appears as this abomination, and everyone assumes that if it's to breach land, then it's just gonna drop dead because of its own weight. And at first, it looks like it does, but then it starts evolving, and it's played to the classic music from the original Godzilla composed by Akira Ifukube when Godzilla first comes into Tokyo. And Godzilla basically grows smaller arms. He's able to stand upright, his gills are reduced, and he turns into this red dinosaur that still has the creepy fish eyes, but he's able to belch out the original 1954 roar. And funny enough, he's also the size of the original 1954 Godzilla, 50 meters. Before Godzilla evolves, the Japanese Self-Defense Force is sent in to take care of the situation and hopefully kill the monster. So they corner Godzilla, they're about to fire, but they're given the order to halt because there are still civilians in the area. And as I mentioned in my spoiler-free review, one of the elements that this movie touches upon is the fact that the Japanese Self-Defense Force cannot really fire in an area where there are civilians. There can be no civilian casualties under the order of the Japanese Self-Defense Force, otherwise the entire division would be demolished. So the Prime Minister makes the difficult decision to abort the mission, so the helicopters leave, and that allows Godzilla to head back into the ocean. So it's a really strange sequence because you really never expected Godzilla to look like that, especially given how he looks in all of the trailers and the posters leading up to this point. So if you're curious about the origin of Godzilla, how it's different, in the original series, Godzilla was simply just a dinosaur that was just woken up by nuclear tests and mutated. They touch upon this in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, where he starts out as a Godzillasaurus, and then, due to nuclear testings, he radiates and mutates into Godzilla. In this movie, the idea of Godzilla mutating through nuclear energy is still there, except Godzilla starts off as a tadpole feeding on nuclear waste, as it then evolves into this, which is its second form, and then to this, which is its third form, and then into the Godzilla that's been advertised, which is its fourth and final form. And it was discovered by a scientist who left documents behind for the government to find out. I'm not quite sure how exactly he comes across this discovery, but I think it's one of those things where he came across Godzilla by accident. And it was one of those things that was so horrific that he basically killed himself, but left notes behind just in case somebody needed to destroy Godzilla. I'm not exactly 100% sure on that aspect, so if anyone who's seen the movie could leave a comment down below, then I would greatly appreciate it. So that's the first element of spoilers that I want to talk about. The second element of spoilers is Godzilla's atomic breath. Now I know what you're thinking. How in the hell could Godzilla's most iconic feature be a spoiler? Well, trust me, it is. As we saw in the trailers, or the last shot of the final trailer for Japan, we saw that Godzilla was about to fire purple atomic breath. After that shot, in the actual movie, his bottom jaw kind of splits open, and he starts to breathe black smoke all over the streets of Tokyo. This is in the middle of the movie, after the fantastic sequence where the Japanese Self-Defense Force tries to hold back Godzilla and push him back with everything they have at their disposal. It's an incredible sequence. But getting back to the atomic breath, Godzilla starts out shooting black smoke all over the streets of Tokyo, and we assume that it's some form of gas because soon after that, he ignites the gas with fire. The very first time Godzilla has ever breathed fire, because when I did my original series of Godzilla reviews on my old channel 3 years ago, one of the very first things I said was that he doesn't breathe fire but atomic breath. this has shown that, yeah, Godzilla can now breathe fire, or at least this interpretation. And then he concentrates the fire into this purple beam that takes out a couple of United States military bombers that injured Godzilla beforehand. And you're thinking, okay, this Godzilla is really horrific in terms of its atomic breath, because this is a sequence that really haunted me. And the only thing that kind of ruined the fear of this whole sequence is that Godzilla now has the ability to shoot purple lasers out of his back. It's one of the issues of the movie that I just am not really a fan of. It just seems like, for a movie that's really mostly serious in tone, it has funny elements here and there, but for a movie that has a consistent tone throughout 95% of it, and especially during this really horrific and dramatic sequence, the lasers out of his back feels a little too ridiculous. And it also got silly when Godzilla started shooting a laser from the tip of his tail during the final battle. Even one of the Self-Defense Force guys says, "How can he do that?" And I'm like, yeah, that's a damn good question right there. How can Godzilla shoot a laser from his tail? I mean, it is cool, and it never deviates from the spirit of Godzilla, but it just got a little absurd. But anyway, back to that scene in the middle. He starts firing his purple laser, killing the Japanese Prime Minister, and demolishing several buildings, cutting them in half, before it turns into the fire again and sets Tokyo ablaze. It is a haunting sequence, and the visuals are outstanding. After I saw this movie for the first time, I spent a day thinking about that whole sequence and just how horrifying it is. And the music that plays to it is the music from the last Japanese trailer, which, that's another element I forgot to mention in my spoiler-free review, is that the music is outstanding. There are a few selected pieces of stock music from the old Akira Ifukube scores, like from the original Godzilla, King Kong vs. Godzilla, Terror of Mechagodzilla, and Battle from Outer Space. It's all fun to hear, but the actual music, composed by the composer of Evangelion, is really haunting, especially whenever Godzilla is causing destruction. So that whole sequence is jaw-droppingly beautiful and horrific at the same time. And then Godzilla basically uses up all of his energy and falls asleep in the middle of Tokyo, but it's more like he just kind of powers down, almost like he's Mechagodzilla, which is strange, but whatever. I'm willing to buy this new interpretation of Godzilla. So the last aspect of spoilers that I want to talk about is the ending. During the time Godzilla is sleeping in the middle of the city, our heroes try to figure out how to stop Godzilla, and they figure they can probably inject coolant into him to freeze his blood and basically freeze him altogether. So they spend several days doing this while they're trying to race against the fact that the US and the United Nations wants to nuke Godzilla, which is something that the Japanese are not happy about at all, because they were the country that experienced the nuclear bombs firsthand with Hiroshima and Nagasaki in World War II. So the idea of another nuke dropping on them is not something to be taken lightly. The entire country is horrified at it, and they are pretty much racing to try to come up with this alternative so Japan won't have to be nuked again. And that's one aspect of the movie that I failed to mention in my spoiler-free review, is that the United States of America, while not really bashed upon, is not really looked at in the most positive way either. We see how the Japanese government views Americans and their tactics on trying to get rid of Godzilla, and it's not in a very positive manner, which, I mean, I don't blame him. When you got an orange hemorrhoid running for president, then I can't really blame another country for looking at us that way. But not getting into that aspect. But they don't bash on the United States completely, because once we get to the climax of the film, we see that the United States is helping Japan in trying to defeat Godzilla with this coolant plan, which the coolant itself was provided by the French. And this all plays into the theme of unity that this movie tries to replicate, and as I mentioned in my spoiler-free review, was a theme that Ishiro Honda used in most of his movies, especially in the 1954 Godzilla. But anyway, back to that climax. So what they do is have this fantastic action sequence once again, played to the Akira Ifukube theme from Battle in Outer Space, which gives you that old, yeah, go get him feeling. It's a really bizarre element, but basically the idea is they want to have Godzilla use up all of his nuclear energy again. That way it's easier for the Japanese self-defense force to knock him down and basically feed him coolant. And it works. They do lose some men in the process, but they do manage to freeze Godzilla, and he's basically frozen solid in the middle of Tokyo. Which is a little weird, because after that we see shots of everybody cheering and being happy that the day is won, and I'm just like, there's a giant monster frozen in the middle of the city. I don't think now is really the time to be celebrating. I mean, if you killed him with the oxygen destroyer or dumped him in a volcano, then maybe I could see a time for celebration, but that thing is still in the middle of the city. And to make matters even more confusing and horrific, I have to talk about the final shot in this movie. The final shot focuses on Godzilla, but we see little things coming out of Godzilla's tail. I don't really have any images to show because they're all really bootleg and of low quality, so you wouldn't be able to make out what it is. But basically, we see these humanoid figures, skeletons with Godzilla's spines, coming out of his tail, that little red area at the tip of his tail, and you're just like, what the hell is that? What is that? That's horrifying. It's disgusting. And we're never really given an answer. We see the final shot where it pans up to Godzilla's whole tail, and then it cuts to credits. So it's an element that I think is left up for interpretation. This definitely makes me more anticipated to see the sequel to this rather than the sequel to the Gareth Edwards Godzilla, which I still really like. But this movie just really left me wanting more. And I've seen this movie 2 times, and even I can't make out how I feel about the ending. I mean, no, how I feel is that I feel creeped out, but what to make of those things coming out of Godzilla's tail, because they're humanoid, but they're obviously bigger than humans. I just don't know. But they do address at some point in the movie earlier on that Godzilla can reproduce asexually. Not like Zilla in Roland Emmerich's movie where he can lay eggs, but more like things can morph off of Godzilla, or there's a possibility of that. So maybe that's what they were hinting, but the idea of a bunch of humanoid Godzillas is, I don't know. It's just really creepy. So that's all I wanted to talk about in terms of the spoilers for Godzilla Resurgence. And the last thing I wanted to address that I mentioned in my spoiler-free review is why I think that the 2014 Godzilla has more rewatch value than this movie. And simply put, this movie has a lot of board meetings. Most of the movie is the Japanese government dealing with Godzilla in a realistic manner. And I'll say this, I was never bored in those scenes. They're downright fascinating and have great dialogue and actors. But I do feel like they go for a little too long. And the reason why this has a little more entertainment value is because there are some creepy, intense moments with the Mutos. When you're not getting Godzilla, you at least get the Mutos causing destruction, and just learning about these creatures is really cool. So this movie definitely has that. But in the end, Godzilla Resurgence, or Shin Godzilla, is a much more well-made film. In some ways, it's almost like art, and upon a second viewing, I absolutely love this movie. It's ranked up as one of my top 10 favorite Godzilla movies, and I've actually had time to think about that. And it's also in the running for Best of the Year for me. And this is not me fanboying. Okay, I am fanboying because I just love Godzilla, but I'm dead serious when I say that this is in the running for one of my favorite movies of the year. And I've really had time to think about this. I've had 2, almost 3 weeks to think about whether or not this would qualify for Best of the Year, and I think it does. It's a really well-made movie. The script is great. The actors do a fantastic job, only if they're Japanese. The action scenes are phenomenal. Godzilla is scary. It's just a really incredibly well-made film all around. I would definitely recommend it if you're not a Godzilla fan. But if you want to see it in theaters, you have until October 18th to do it, so better hurry. And that's all I have to say about the spoilers for Godzilla Resurgence. I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on the spoilers, if you've seen the movie. And as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you, there is only one